Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of NCompass Live. I am your host, Krista Porter, here at the Nebraska Library Commission. NCompass Live is the Commission's weekly webinar series where we cover a variety of topics that may be of interest to libraries. Excuse me. We broadcast the show live every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time. But if you're unable to join us on Wednesdays, that's fine. We do record the show as we are doing today, and it will be available for you to watch later at your convenience. Both the live show and the recordings are free and open to anyone to watch. So please do spread the word to your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, anyone you think might be interested in any of the topics we have on NCompass Live. For those of you not from Nebraska, the Nebraska Library Commission is the state agency for libraries. So that would be similar to your whatever state library. So we provide training and databases and resources and services and grants to all types of libraries in the state. So you will find shows on NCompass Live for all types of libraries. Public, academic, K-12, corrections, museums, historical societies, et cetera, et cetera. Really, our only criteria is that it's something to do with libraries. We have, sometimes we have Nebraska Library Commission staff come on the show and do presentations about the services and programs and things we're doing here through the commission, but we also bring in guest speakers, which is what we have today. Joining us this morning is Jessica Chamberlain. Good morning again, Jessica.
Good morning.
And she is the director at our Norfolk Public Library here in Nebraska. And she has a presentation here that she did, I think it's at conference, right? Yeah, our Nebraska Library Association conference last year. And some of you may know, you might not. We did try to do the session in December, but Jessica was recovering from a cold and wasn't able to continue with it. Didn't get through the whole presentation. So we are doing it again, yeah. So we have Fostering Healthy Communication in Your Library, take 2 this morning.
Yes.
And
hopefully I was neither healthy nor able to communicate the last time. So it was a fail on all ends.
Exactly, yes, for example, yeah. So I hope you're feeling better now, though.
Yes, thank you.
And I'll just hand it over to you, Jessica, to tell us about how we can do this in our own libraries.
Okay. Well, this is certainly applicable in libraries and in any institution where you work or encounter other people at all, ever. So this is a topic that I care a lot about and have really become passionate about in the last couple of years. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come back, and I'm going to do everything I can to make it all the way to the end and hope my voice holds out. And
fingers
please,
crossed.
yes, fingers crossed. So, all right. So one of the biggest problems with communication is the illusion that it has happened. This is something that Kim Scott said. She's the author of Radical Candor, and we'll be talking about Kim Scott kind of throughout the presentation. But it seems like such a simple thing, but it is so easy to misread things. It's just, it goes wrong so many times. So this is a little note, a little reminder I have that's posted right on my own little bulletin board. So I just want to kind of start with that idea. So we're going to dive in a little bit today and take a look at some ways that we can improve the odds that we are heard, that we are listening, and that we're truly communicating with each other. All right, so let's start with like a very basic communication model. Here is often what we think of in our head as how communication is happening. I say a thing, you hear that thing, and all is well, right? But this is closer to what's happening. So many things get in the way of what we say, what we mean, and then what the other person hears and understands. And on our own end, it includes our own preconceived notions, our assumptions about what the other person already knows, our assumptions of what frame of reference that they might already have, their cultural understanding, their first language, our own emotions and feelings of the day, and our own emotions and feelings about that listener. And then all those things apply to the other person as well. They're bringing all their own preconceived notions and biases to the conversation, all their own feelings and emotions, their own frame of reference. And it's a wonder that any of us understand each other ever. So how can we make it better? How can we increase those odds that we are going to increase and, that we are going to be heard and understood, and that we are also going to hear and understand others? So here's kind of what we're going to take a look at a very high level on this session. We have about an hour, and each one of these topics could be a presentation on its own. So this is more like a sampler menu. It's a little appetizer, a little taste of a lot of these ideas. Just to see if it prompts any self-reflection for you, any ideas that you want to explore further, because like I said, we're just going to kind of touch the surface and give you some things to think about, maybe some tips and tricks that you can use along the way. Okay, so to me, communication all starts with self-awareness and other awareness. This might seem like a basic lesson in how to be human, but it is fundamental that we are thinking about these things when we are working with others. If we are not self-aware, we are not going to realize that we have our own blind spots, and we're not going to understand our own motivations for why we're doing or saying what we're doing or saying, and we're not going to be successful in understanding someone else. So the more aware we are of who we are, and the more unique that we realize that we are, then the more understanding we're going to have for others. That basic other awareness is realizing that we have our own thoughts and feelings, values and beliefs, and other people have those too, and their own personalities and their own communication styles. And all of those things might be similar to yours, but they might not be close to you at all. So we have to start with building that self-awareness. So how do you start with that? There's a million different things. Self-awareness would be a whole nother week-long session, but using things like mindfulness techniques, I think, is a great place to start. When you're having strong emotions about something, when there's a library patron who just really gets under your skin for some reason, pause and think about what's happening in that moment. What are you thinking about? What are you feeling? What can you learn or unravel about this situation that will help you better understand yourself and your emotions? So anytime you're having strong feelings about something, whether somebody cuts you off in traffic or you're super happy about something, that's a great trigger to say, wow, I have a really strong emotion, good or bad, about this. Let me check in with myself. Another idea, if you're feeling really brave, this is a fun thing to do. You can ask like your friends or family to give you 3 words that they think describe you, and use those words as a jumping off point for some reflection and for some thoughtfulness on your end. They will likely say something very nice, but what nice words they choose to use will just help you understand more about what you're projecting to other people and what they're seeing from your actions. For many people, journaling is a great way to get thoughts out of your head and onto the paper. Journaling has also been, shown to help you not only process emotions, but identify them. Like, oh, I didn't even know I was feeling that way until I started writing it down. So journaling can be helpful for a lot of people. But there are a plethora of tools out there. So if you haven't done any intentional self-awareness work before, I strongly encourage you to add that to your resolution list for 2025. And I'm talking here a lot about that self-awareness piece because that's where it starts. In every interaction you have with someone, your own self-awareness should prompt you to think about the other person. Specifically in the realm of communication, this is important because you can start to analyze where communication isn't going well. Your inner dialogue can turn on and you can listen to it and say, it does not seem like they are getting my message. Am I communicating clearly? Have I given them everything they need to succeed? I know that I have barriers to communication sometimes, or barriers to understanding, and I'm sure that they do too. I wonder what theirs are. How can I try again in a different way to better fit their situation? Because successful communication is not about assigning blame. It is not about whose fault it is that the communication isn't going well. It's about being heard and understood regardless. And so you keep trying until that happens. And if that is your end game, is to actually truly communicate without assigning any blame, then you are going to get there, you are going to communicate, and you're going to do it with your relationships still intact. So some other tools you can use to build self-awareness are using like professional assessments. A lot of people have taken like the Myers-Briggs assessment, which doesn't get a lot of scientific validity, but it's still an interesting, self-awareness tool. My favorite one is called the DISC. And what I like about the DISC is that it is about observable behavior. It's not about your personality type or your even really, it's not about your values. It's not about how smart you are. It's really just like, what kind of behaviors do you display to others? And it's very practical. It will give you like a list of ways to communicate with people like that have this similar profile. So this is really helpful in a team setting because you get lists of ways to communicate, ways not to communicate, like things this person really does not want you to say to them. And then also it gives you some like keys to managing and also keys to being supervised, like what you're looking for in a manager and how you can better communicate with a manager, whether you are that manager or someone else. So I think that's a really good one. Last year, we hired a consultant to do this at our library with our library team. We got a Library Commission CE grant. So thank you to the commission for that. And it was amazing. We still have, we all got these little tents to put on our desks, gives our little profile so that we could share with others kind of like what our strengths are and where we're coming from. It's been wonderful. I actually like this assessment so much that I got trained to do it myself, and now I can do it with my staff. But it's certainly not the only one out there. Another one that a lot of people really like is the Clifton Strengths. And this is a great one because you are building on what you're good at. You're building on your strengths, and you're able to look at yourself a little bit more objectively about what you're good at, and then go from there. So then you can try to find things in your job that really apply to those strengths. Or if you're looking for a new job, you can be looking for a job that is going to let you leverage these strengths that you already have. So these are all under that realm of self-awareness, and there's lots of ways to do that. But I do think it's really, really important that we start with self-awareness, thinking about ourselves, thinking about others. So we've been going for about 10 minutes. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to the next section?
Let's see, nobody has put anything yet. I'm just checking here. Yeah, if you have any questions, you can type in that question section, or any comments, or have any of you done any of these assessments yourself? And what do you think of them? I know Myers-Briggs is the one that everyone thinks of, and I always have had issues with that one. It just didn't seem to speak to me, I guess, as well as others. So I like that we have other options now that people are using that seem to be much more useful.
Yeah, and Myers-Briggs has come under some pretty heavy criticism for its accuracy.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's kind of like, it's like if you read your horoscope, I don't know what people think about that, but sometimes it just, it prompts some thoughts, like, right, like it's at least a point of like, oh, I wonder, does that sound true? Does that sound like me? So
I think it's good to get you thinking. I don't like the concept of being labeled as, oh, well, you're this type, so I'm only going to treat you this way because I've been told that's the only way to treat you. I think it's just way too limiting.
yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want in any of those assessments some flexibility, right? Like even though this might be something that you're really good at or something that you might do a lot, doesn't mean you're not flexible and able to do other things. Yeah.
I've seen so many people that say, well, I know we did this, but I know you're this, so I can't talk to you or I can't deal with you about whatever. I just don't like that.
Oh, no, that's not the intent. That's not.
You have a question about the DISC one there. Are there free versions of the DISC available on the web? Like, are there places to find this for themselves?
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yes, I think that there are free versions online. I have not used them though. We went through a consultant when we did it with our team, and now I do that, but so I can't say like how good they are, or I did have someone tell me they did one and then they hit like a paywall at a certain point, like they were able to get through some of it and then they had to pay to get the rest of it. So So, but I think there are. I
Mm,
just can't recommend any sites offhand.
yeah. Okay.
All right. So
Cool.
our next section is about listening, active listening. I love this quote from Stephen Covey. The first time that I heard this, it really blew my mind because I thought, yes, I do that. I am so guilty of that. And the quote is, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And I think that is true of a lot of us because,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's not necessarily a bad thing in that usually that's your way of trying to relate or you want to share, you want to participate in the conversation. So it's not necessarily coming from a bad place, but when we're thinking too much about what we want to say, we're not really listening to the other person in the best way that we could. So one thing to think about is what they call active listening. This is a way of listening and responding to another person that really does improve mutual understanding. It's about being present. It's about listening to understand and showing active interest in and engagement in the dialogue. So let's break that down a little bit. Being present means putting away distractions. It means putting down your phone. It means turning off the TV, moving away from your keyboard if you're sitting at the desk, but really trying to pay full attention to the one person who is speaking to you at that time. There's a lot in the media right now about the distraction economy, distraction culture. On the way into work this morning, I heard the state legislatures talking about restricting cell phones in schools because of, how distraction affects education. Um, and as adults, I think we're all guilty of a lot of those things too. So it's really about being present, doing that only one thing. Stop trying to multitask. When you're trying to have a conversation with someone or someone's trying to tell you something, just do that one thing. And then listening to understand, not to respond. That goes back to that Stephen Covey quote. The Dalai Lama is quoted as saying, when you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. But when you listen, you may learn something new. So try to learn something new. Try to
Mhm.
not think about your response until the other person is done. Most of us are fairly adept at conversation back and forth. And if you pause for just a second, nobody's going to be hurt by that, right? Like we're all going to understand if you're like, oh, I'm really listening to that. Now I need a second to gather my thoughts and give my response. That is a perfectly acceptable social thing to do. So don't feel that you have to go so fast.
Do that all the time. Lots of let me see. And this kind of reminds me of listening. This active listening is we as librarians, if you've been taught to do a reference interview, it's the same kind of thing. It just dawned on me that this is the same thing, that you have to ask the person, what do you need? And then listen to what they're actually telling you. And maybe listen to what they're not telling you, because as we know, as librarians in reference interview, they don't always say what they really mean. You've got to kind of dig it out from there by taking the cues from some of the things that they've said. So I wonder if some of us as
Yes.
librarians have that little extra bit of training from that reference interview that we've learned of how
Yes.
to pay attention and listen. Yeah.
I love that connection. I think that is so true. And you don't want to treat every conversation like as intense as a reference interview. But yeah, bringing some of those skills in and applying them to conversations with your coworkers, conversations with your supervisors, that is a wonderful thing to do because you want to walk away knowing that you really do understand what's being asked of you or what's being shared with you. Yeah, I love that connection. Thank you, Krista. And then the last part is showing active interest in and engagement in the conversation. And this is a lot about body language. Um, Making eye contact if that's comfortable for you, leaning in, nodding your head, and fidgeting if that's a thing that you need to do. I know a lot of people don't want to sit really still, and that's okay. That's not going to distract from that engagement. You just want to make sure that you are showing the other person with your physical self that you are listening and that you are there with them. And then that engagement is making sure that when you follow up, like when they tell you something, you're acknowledging what they are feeling. Like, oh, I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice. What else can you tell me about that? Oh, I can tell you really loved that. That was great. So you're engaging in what they're telling you and then building on it. And if we go a little deeper into that, we can talk about reflective listening, which can feel like it's going to maybe be a little awkward at first, but you are really just reflecting back to the speaker what you heard and then kind of repeating it in a little bit of a summary. So like the person tells you about a situation at work and they're really upset about it, and you say back to them something like, it sounds like you're really frustrated about how your boss handled that situation. Or I can tell how frustrated you are, and your goal is not only to help them feel heard, but you're also checking in with them. Like, did I hear that right? This is what I heard. I heard you're frustrated. And so then if that's not correct, they're going to be able to say, no, 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 that's not what I meant. Or maybe that's really what they conveyed, but that's not, they're like working through their own thing. So if you're reflecting back to them what you hear, you're giving them a chance to process and actually get to the heart of what it is that they wanted to tell you. If you're in like a less personal conversation and it's more task oriented, that reflective listening can look something more like saying, let me repeat back to you what you said so I can be sure that I understand. Or I don't want to make any assumptions. Can you tell me more about XYZ? Or this is what I hear you saying you want me to do. I'm going to do 1, I'm going to do 2, I'm going to do 3. Okay. So that is just good practice anytime you're in a work situation and you're communicating, especially verbally, just to repeat back and make sure that we're all on the same page about what's going to happen and what you expect of me and what I expect of you. So another thing that we can do sometimes is to ask better questions. A lot of times we don't think a whole lot about the questions that we're asking, but when we ask better questions, we are being genuinely curious. If we're already working on being fully present and not distracted, you're going to want to have communication that's worth your attention. You want to actually be curious about the conversation. Why is this person sharing this with me? What is it they're trying to tell me? What can I learn from it? What can I add to it? And if you start from a place of curiosity, which includes that all important other awareness, and that curiosity about the other person, you're going to find you're maybe more motivated to actually want to understand. Another big thing is asking open-ended questions that dig a little bit deeper. How did they feel in that moment? What was going on in their mind? What would they do differently next time? Questions that make the conversation richer, instead of a closed-ended question. So a closed-ended question would be like, did you have a good time at conference? Yes. It does not really invite any other follow-up. Like someone might offer it, but it doesn't invite it. And an open-ended question would be more like, what was the best session you attended at conference? And then when they tell you what it is, then you follow up with, some of that reflective listening. Oh, that sounds really interesting. What parts of that do you think we could apply here? You're asking them to, continue on. Open-ended questions are best when they start with like what, when, how, etc. You want to be careful about using why. A lot of times we jump into a why question like, why did you do that? And that could be okay, but it can also, if we're not very, very careful with our tone, a why did you do that can come out kind of snarky. So instead of that, you could say something like, what do you think made you make that decision? Or what were you thinking about when you chose that? Or, if you can reframe a why question into a what question, a lot of times it just sounds a little bit softer, and you're more likely to get a less defensive answer. We're going to talk again with Kim Scott. One of her favorite questions is to ask in like one-on-one meetings is, what could I do or not do that would make me easier to work with? I love this question, but right? That's a tough question. It takes a lot of vulnerability to ask that question.
A lot of brave. You got to be brave. Yes.
Yeah. And it also takes a good relationship with the other person, because they have to know that they can be honest with you and give you an actual answer, and that you're going to be okay with that. So there's a lot of relationship building, and we'll get to some more about Kim Scott later that will put that into context a little bit. But that kind of leads us into assertive communication and how we can be honest with people and still be kind. And still be good coworkers, good friends, but say what we need to say. So here's a couple of quotes by some wonderful women and their thoughts on this topic. But nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent, by Eleanor Roosevelt. And if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu, which I just thought was funny. But it is about being assertive and making sure you do have a seat at the table when conversations are happening. Okay, so you can tell I'm not a graphic designer, and I made this very lovely graphic for us to look at. But here are the main categories of communication that we're going to look at today. There's passive, aggressive, and assertive is in the middle. There is also passive aggressive, but that's really more about masked anger than a true communication style. So we're not going to focus on that one a whole lot. Excuse me. So during passive communication, a person prioritizes the needs, wants, and feelings of others over themselves, even at their own expense. This can lead to being taken advantage of, even by well-meaning people who just aren't aware of the passive person's wants or needs. A passive communicator sets up scenarios. If we're going to put it in simple binary thinking in this way, they're putting up scenarios where they lose and the other person wins. So a passive communicator may look like someone who does not express themselves, allows others to take advantage, has body language that makes them look small, lacks confidence. And this one comes with some qualifiers. A passive communicator could be soft-spoken or quiet, but just because you're soft-spoken and quiet does not mean that you're passive. So those are not necessarily correlated. So let's flip to the other side, and the opposite end of the spectrum is the aggressive communicator. And this is a person who expresses that only their own needs, wants, and feelings matter. The other person gets bullied and the other person's needs are ignored. An aggressive communicator sets up scenarios where they win and everyone else loses. So an aggressive communicator might look like someone who speaks in a loud or overbearing way, is unwilling to compromise, uses criticism, humiliation, or domination, frequently interrupts and does not listen, is disrespectful to others, and uses body language that makes them look bigger. They might often be, hands on hips or arms big, or standing real tall. Sometimes we do that to make ourselves feel confident too. So, again, that's not always the case, but just some things to look for. So if we go back into the middle under assertive communication, that emphasizes the importance of both people's needs. During assertive communication, a person stands up for their own needs, wants, and feelings, but also listens and respects the needs of others. Assertive communication is defined by confidence and a willing to compromise. An assertive communicator is setting up scenarios, or at least trying to set up scenarios, where everybody wins. Both parties can win in the situation. So it might look like someone who listens without interruption, clearly states their own wants and needs in a respectful way, is willing to compromise, stands up for their own rights, has confident tone and body language, and has good, open body language. So let's look at a few examples. In scenario A, a friend asks to borrow your car. This will be a huge inconvenience for you. So how might these different people, these different communication styles, answer that question? The passive communicator might say, yeah, I guess that's fine. Do you want me to fill the tank? So they need the car, but they're giving it up even though they don't need it, because they're not willing or able to share what they actually need in that situation. On the other end, the aggressive person would just say, no way, why would I even let you borrow my car? You're crazy to even ask. They would just go over and above. They wouldn't just say no, they would blow up about it. And if you're in the middle, you might, if you're trying to do that assertive communication, You might say something like, I'm sorry, I need my car that day, but I could drop you off. So you're asserting your own need, you're saying what you need out of that situation, but you're also offering to help. You're still being kind. Now,
Mhm.
if you're being passive aggressive, you would probably say yes, they could borrow it and then take the car to the shop so it wasn't available, or lose the keys or something like, but you wouldn't give it to them, but you wouldn't tell them you wouldn't give it to them.
Yeah.
So here's another scenario. So a coworker asks you to fill in for them at a program. So they are sick and they need you to fill in at whatever program they were going to do. And you normally would help out, but today you have a big project that's due. And if you don't get your project done, there are repercussions for you personally and professionally that you have to, to deal with. So if you were passively communicating, you would say, yes, of course I'll help. And you wouldn't even tell them that your own work will suffer because you are doing their, helping out for them instead of doing your own work.
Mm.
If you were aggressive, you would just, are you kidding me? You're never prepared for your own stuff. I have too much to do. So you're not just saying no, you're insulting, you're being, rude, you're going that other end of the spectrum. So if you were trying to be assertive, one thing you could say would be like, I'd love to help, but I have a big project to do today. Is there something else I could do to help you once I've turned this in? It's probably 1,000 different ways you could do that, but you have to find a way to acknowledge what you need out of the situation, and you have to be able to say no. We can't always say yes. We can't always be the one who's the helper. Sometimes that has to be somebody else.
It's a lot about balance. I think the assertive is like yes, but, or got to take everything in consideration. Yeah, not one or the other extreme. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It is a lot about balance, and it is about not being afraid to say no, because sometimes you have to say no, but finding a way to say no that still keeps that relationship intact. It is still respectful and kind, but also doesn't put yourself at the bottom of the list. You are as important as the other person. You are not more important. You are not less important. You are equally as important, and you all should get what you need. So you don't have to always put yourself at the bottom and do what everybody else is, asking of you.
I think a lot of people with that ask of, do this for me, can you do this for me, is they get the feeling that I have to be a team player. I have to be, I'm going to get in trouble at work if I don't help everyone who asks me. If I say no to someone, is my supervisor going to come down on me about that, about not being a team player? All that
Mhm.
horrible language.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think
Being
that is
supportive
probably
supervisor
something
too.
that a lot of people think about. Yeah, but I think if you're using respectful, assertive communication, you can still be a great team player because you're not saying you would never help. You're saying, I would love to help. I cannot help this time right now. But in other situations, I normally would say yes. And when I can balance my own workload and help others, absolutely. It's just in those situations where you're going to put your own health, your own happiness, your own professional success, when those things become at risk because you're overextending and you're helping in ways that go beyond um, that those limits. But that's probably a whole nother session that we could talk about how to set those boundaries and what those look like. But yeah. Here's a good assertive example with a patron. Because sometimes patrons, it can be hard to be assertive with patrons in the library too, especially for those public librarians out there and probably college librarians too. I'm sure students do wacky things sometimes, school librarians. So here's an example of like a patron is eating Cheetos at the computer station, getting crumbs everywhere, and in your library, Cheetos are not allowed by the computers. And since you're the one who sees the behavior, you're supposed to address it. So if you're being a passive communicator, you would ignore it because you don't want to hurt their feelings or you don't want to confront them. And when they leave, you just go over and clean up their mess. If you're being aggressive, of course, that'd be the opposite. Hey, you can't do that in here. You better clean up after yourself. You are always so messy, using personal insults. But an assertive way to handle that would be to just clearly state the rules and ask them, tell them that you need them to change their behavior. So, hello, we don't allow eating by the computers. You're welcome to take your snack to the cafe, or you're welcome to just put it away until you're done. So you're just clearly stating the rules and telling them what you need. So any questions about that from our audience?
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, anybody have any questions about passive, assertive, aggressive communication? We do have a comment though, and I agree with this too, and I think it definitely happens. Sometimes it's easier said than done. I think the being able to say no and standing up a little bit for yourself in that assertive one. But they say as I've gotten older, it's gotten easier to put myself first.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that too. I have a lot less patience for stuff like that. I'm like, you know what? No, we're not doing that. We're doing this, or I can't do that. Self-care, that is a huge thing that's going, huge,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say buzzword because it's important, but it's a big, an important concept that a lot of people are becoming more aware and accepting of. Like, you know what? I need to think about me as well.
Yeah, and there's a way to do that and not be selfish, right? Like we're not saying everyone should be selfish.
No.
Yeah, but that self-care, I love that that's gotten so much more traction in the media, and self-care, you have to be self-aware to start that self-care. You have to know what you need and what's going to feed you. And I totally respect the commenter who said this is easier said than done, because 100% it is. Is it easy to talk about it? Is it easy to do in practice every time? Absolutely not. But if we don't at least start with thinking about it, I think having it as an awareness and a goal for ourselves, I think makes it more likely that we're going to be successful. We're going to do it more often than less often. At least if we're thinking about it, it's something we can strive for, and strive for that balance of standing up for ourselves when we need to. So, yeah.
We do have a question about being aggressive. How do you deal with the aggressive coworker when they deal with patrons? I'm assertive, but my coworker is aggressive. So towards the patron behavior.
Well, that is maybe an issue for the supervisor to get involved. If you can alert, the supervisor that you have some concerns that assertive is going into aggressive, and because that should be their job to do some retraining or some education with that person about where that line is and where that line is in your library and in your culture. Yeah,
Definitely.
Well, we're going to go a little bit deeper into assertive. These are called assertiveness statements. And for those times when it is really hard to be assertive, these sometimes can help. And we're all going to have situations where we're going to just naturally lean a little more passive in certain situations, or a little more aggressive even in some certain situations. And usually those are when you have really strong emotions about something. You're going to go to the extremes when there's a lot of emotion involved. So in situations of high emotion or potential high conflict, high stress, using an assertiveness statement can be really helpful. Some people call these I statements. And one thing I love about these is that they are not about being polite. They are about being clear. We are going to be clear and we are going to be respectful, but this is when you really need to get your message across. So, and you're making the statement about your own feelings and needs in these situations. So when you make the statement about your own feelings and needs, you're able to express those to someone else. And the goal here is to do that without blame and shame. You're not saying this is your fault. You're not saying this is anybody. I'm just telling you what I need. So it's more likely to open up dialogue and lessen the likelihood that it's going to escalate the conflict. It's not a magic spell. It's not going to fix all problems, but it can increase those odds and often create opportunity for constructive conversation. So here's some examples. Like, so obviously these are the little things you're gonna fuel into this statement. I feel blank when blank because blank, and this is what I need. So maybe what you really want to say to someone is, you never listen to anyone, and you are not listening to me now. The tough parts about that, and it's natural to think that, but the tough parts of that when the other person hears it is that you're generalizing their behavior all the time, and you're also blaming them for the behavior. And maybe they deserve the blame, but that healthy communication, remember, is not about assigning blame. It's about being heard and understood. So if we craft an I statement out of that, we take that blame and shame out of it. And we say something like, I feel that my concerns are not being heard when you're staring at your phone during this meeting or looking at your phone during this meeting. I would prefer it if you would put your phone down during our discussion. And also, when you're crafting these, you have to really keep your tone in mind. If you say it's snarky, it doesn't matter what words you use, they're going to hear that tone and respond to that. But what you're saying in that is like, I feel like you're not listening, and I need you to put this down so that we can have our conversation. Here's another example. It's rude. What you want to say is, it's rude of you to be late all the time, and you are screwing up everyone's schedule, right? Maybe you're late to your desk shift, and now the next person is late, the next thing they have to do, and it's just causing this big problem. And it is, you feel like it's rude. But instead of saying it in that way, you can say something like, I feel frustrated when you are scheduled to be at the desk at 8:30, but you don't come in until 9. Your being late means we can't start our meetings on time. I need you to arrive to work on time. So you could adapt that to lots of different situations, but you're taking the blame out of it. You're not generalizing. You're using very specific language. You're saying, I feel frustrated when you do this particular thing. What I need is for you to do this. And this is especially good for supervisors or parents. But yeah, these I statements can be used whether you're supervising other people or whether you are a coworker or things like that. So here's another one, just to kind of give another example. Maybe you feel like this. The salaries in this department are totally inequitable. And maybe that's true. And maybe that's what you want to say to your manager. But at this point, it's just a complaint. There's no action requested there. You're just saying a thing that you don't like. So if you really want action on this, you really want them to do something about it. If you put that into an I statement, you are building in how you feel, why you feel that way, and what you would like them to do about it. So you could say something like, I feel angry about the salary structure in this department. I've been here a long time and I feel very unappreciated. I would like to understand more about how salaries are calculated, and I would like to talk to you about whether raising my salary is possible. Right? So, and obviously you would adapt all that to your culture, your language, your cycle of budgets and your systems and all of that. But you're putting that into this kind of formula so that you can clearly communicate in a situation where it might be high stress for you, or a high potential of high conflict or high emotion. All right, so if we go even deeper, we're going from assertiveness to assertiveness statements. Now we're going to get to radical candor. And some of you might be familiar with Kim Scott's radical candor model. To give credit, the graphic and descriptions are taken directly from her website, radicalcandor.com. Also, she has a book by the same name. She's got a couple spin-off books in the radical candor field. So if you're not familiar with this model, the main tenets are that to be a great boss, you should care personally while challenging directly. And this is the radical candor that will result in compassionate honesty that will let your employees grow and flourish. So she's coming at this from like a big business standpoint. She worked at Google and Twitter and lots of other big tech companies. And she's also specifically looking at it from like a boss-employee relationship. But I think this can be applied in a bunch of different scenarios, and I think it has applications well beyond being a supervisor of anyone else. Because when you get down to it, It's about being a caring person who uses assertive language. Like that's really what her whole model is all about. And if you are interested in this, I've got a little link on there under her picture. She did, if anyone here is part of the Library Speakers Consortium that have the online author talks, she was on that last summer. And so you can find that archived video. It's about 45 minutes of her talking about it herself. So.
And while you're mentioning this, the link on the slides here, just want to know when we have the recording done afterwards with this, we'll also have a link to Jessica's slides, sharing a link to the presentation, so you'll be able to go back and review all of these later.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with obnoxious aggression. That's pretty well defined. You don't even really have to explain that. But she says it's brutal honesty or front stabbing. What happens when you challenge someone directly, but you don't care about them personally. So it's praise that's not sincere or criticism that's not delivered kindly. So if we go to the opposite end of the corner, we've got ruinous empathy. And this is what happens when you want to share someone's short-term feelings so you don't tell them something that they really do need to know. You care personally about them, but you fail to challenge them directly. So this is, maybe criticism that is sugar-coated or unclear or simply silence. Ruinous empathy can feel nice or safe, but it's ultimately unhelpful and even damaging because it is feedback that the person does actually need, whether it's a coworker or an employee that you supervise that really does need to do something better, whether it's a friend who is doing something dangerous for themselves. Anyone in your life, if you actually care about them and there is a situation that needs to be remedied, you have to find a way to tell them. And personally, I feel like this is the most common feedback fail I've seen in libraries because we are often uncomfortable with conflict. We're afraid that our honest communication is either going to cause conflict or result in hurt feelings. Because I think the caring personally part comes easily to a lot of people in the library world. We're in a helping profession, we're in a serving profession, and we do often care a lot. But sometimes being able to stand up, to be assertive, to use that communication and to really be honest is hard. It's really hard stuff. So, but I think it's important to remember that you might be trying to spare someone short-term feelings, and maybe it's easier in the short term, but in the long term, if you look at the big picture, it is often not the best thing to do for yourself, for that other person, for the organization, for the friendship, for whatever situation. So we'll go down to the bottom then, and that section is manipulative insincerity, and this is backstabbing, passive-aggressive behavior. And it's what happens when you don't care and you don't challenge. You just have kind of given up on this person. It's often a reaction to the obnoxious aggression. But obviously it's also a fail. This is not what we're going for. So we finally get to the goal of radical candor, where you're giving, you do care, you're willing to challenge someone, but you're also giving them praise that is specific and sincere. And then the criticism is kind and clear. So and to get to that point, you have to be able to give and receive this kind of honest, assertive, but kind communication. So this is where we can go back to that question that she loves to ask, what could I do or not do to make me easier to work with? If you are not in an environment of radical candor where you can be kind and clear and assertive and still respectful, if you're not willing to give and receive in those ways, then I would not ask someone that question. But if you can get to the space of radical candor, you can ask that question. And I have asked a few of my employees that question, that we have that relationship. And it's not been as bad as it seems like at first. It was scary to ask the question. But when you have those good relationships and that good communication, it really is a great thing to be able to do. So I would love to, that's the end of the formal presentation. I would love to open it up to comments of if people have success stories about their own library and library culture, things that are going well for you, um, or other questions that you have.
Sure, yeah. Um, yes, if anybody does have any questions, you want to dig in deeper to any of these different uh, ways of handling this, ways of evaluating the assessments, the ways of being communicating in your library, or like you said at the beginning, Jessica, and anything in life. Um, please do type into the questions section. And yeah, if you have had any situations where you've used any of these, or other ways that you've dealt with issues, problems with patrons or with staff, whether it's your coworkers or if you're a supervisor, definitely type in the questions section. Nobody has anything there right now, so we got plenty of time to answer any of your questions or
Yeah.
have a discussion about what you are doing in your library. Love to hear some ideas, or if other people have experienced. Has anybody used any of these elsewhere?
Well, and I'll move on to the last part too, is just, if rather than what's going well, you have any takeaways from today or action steps, action items that you're thinking about for yourself,
Mm.
that you think would be good, that you want to share with the group. I always love to end something like this. Like, there's a lot to think about, and you may not have any action steps right now. You might not have something you want to actually do at this moment. You maybe need some time to process. Um, but if you do, saying them out loud, typing them in the chat box, even anonymously, like getting them out there is a great way to motivate yourself and to say, you know what, this is the thing I'm going to do. This is something I'm going to start doing, or something I'm going to try, or even something
Maybe
I'm going to ask.
investigating some of those assessment tools that you mentioned, those
Hmm.
ideas. That would be in action. Just, I'm just going to look at some of that and see,
Hmm.
what they're all about. Someone just say this has been so helpful. Thank you. Cool.
Oh,
Um,
good, good.
and then someone else, we do have a new comment here. I try to be assertive in everything I do. I feel I have been most of the time. I do have patrons that won't come in if they don't see my car there. So that's a good thing. They know that you're the good person you can communicate with and will help them and deal with them.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I think, some of it is maybe we learned this in high school, or maybe we learned it in college, or maybe we
Mm.
never learned this stuff. I think there's a lot of things about communication that people take for granted that other people know or don't know. And sometimes just taking some time to think about it. Somebody like the passive, the aggressive, the assertive, right? Like, even if you didn't know the labels for those, those people, that kind of communication. So sometimes we're just putting language to concepts that you already know, but once you've got the language for it, it's a little easier to think about. It's a little bit easier to analyze or to spot in someone else. Yeah.
You do have a question here, and it's a long sentence. I'm going to read it and maybe have to read it a second time to get it all. Yeah, it says,
I'll get a
so I want to
pencil.
know, can you recommend a way to reframe a situation for myself so that I'm not assigning blame, but it also doesn't feel like I am lying when I try to explain the situation to a third party?
Ooh, okay. So this
Sounds,
would probably be like crafting an I statement about something you're trying to share with someone else. Okay.
yeah. And the third party, and it doesn't say what the third party could be. Is it just another person? Is it a supervisor that you're trying to report to? It doesn't say that. So a way to
Okay.
reframe a situation for myself so I'm not assigning blame, like, hey, they did this, but it doesn't feel like I'm lying when I try to explain a situation. I can see how you're not going to assign blame, but you want to explain what happened. So you're not really saying they did this thing when they did do that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you
Yeah.
not
I
assign
think,
blame? How do you not assign blame, but explain someone really does need to be blamed? I guess is maybe the.
well, you can always just share what you observed, or say, I overheard this interaction and it made me feel really uncomfortable. I thought maybe it was something you would want to be aware of in case that's a situation you need to deal with. That would be maybe one way without knowing, like, and I don't want to ask for, details that would, compromise integrity or confident, anything. So yeah, without knowing a little bit more about it, I'm not sure. But yeah, you could, if you're trying to report like someone else's bad behavior, you can still just report what you observed. And as far as not assigning blame,
Well, I
yeah,
feel like
sometimes
try and take out the emotional part reaction to it. Just say what you saw. Say, I'm
Mhm.
just letting you know this has happened. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you get too emotional. That's where you get into the blame and I can't believe they did this. And can you,
Mhm.
how could this even happen? And
Mhm. Yeah, or focusing on how you felt in that interaction.
mhm.
Um, uh, yeah, I'm trying to think, to the person who made the comment, if that didn't answer it for you, if there's any other
Mhm.
clarity you can give us, I'm happy to keep trying for you. Or feel free to email me later if you want.
Absolutely, yeah. If you want a little more conversation,
Yeah, we
they said
can.
that it actually to just say that helps a lot. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes even at home, it's like, I feel really frustrated when the dishes are all over the counter. I need you to put them in the dishwasher. Thank you.
Yep, yep.
And then I'm not saying, you never put the dishes in the dishwasher, you make such a
Yeah.
big mess.
Or
I'm
what were you
focusing on
doing
like,
all day? Why did you just sit here all day and just walk by these dishes sitting here?
right, do you not see all the dishes on the counter? Yeah,
I feel
yeah,
that.
yes.
All right. Anybody have, oh, we do a comment just came in, of course. Oh, cool. Someone says, appreciate the refresher. I attended your session at NLA, but needed this particularly right now. Thank you so much.
Well, good. I'm glad it came at the right time for you.
Yeah.
And I'm appreciative of the opportunity. I made it all the way through. I'm
Yeah.
still speaking.
Congratulations. We made it. Yes.
Very, very excited about that. Yeah. But this is a topic I just think is so important in libraries. I don't know that we always get these refreshers, right? That we need just to
Yeah.
remind us how important this kind of stuff is, to our own work satisfaction, but also to the service that we provide the community, that we provide our patrons. When we're good communicators, we're able to diffuse conflict better. We're able to reduce conflict with our coworkers, with patrons. It's just so widely applicable.
Yeah.
So it's
Being
important
that
stuff.
public facing. Yeah.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, and that's why we do these things here. You may sometimes see often here on NCompass Live or in other webinars or online sessions, something that was presented previously. And with the thing, you need to say something and hear something so many times before it sticks.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing here. Get this out there. This whole thing has been recorded today, and it will be posted. So if you do want to come back and rewatch it, to give yourself a refresher, you'll be able to do that. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, and we got some more thank yous coming in. Yeah, so it is a little after 11 a.m. So I think if anybody has you want any more desperate, urgent questions you want to ask of Jessica, get it into the questions section here. But I will, so I'll keep an eye on that while I do my wrap up as well. So thank you, Jessica and Krista. Very helpful and informative. That's the idea. Yeah,
Well,
we're glad.
thank you. Thank you.
So thank you, Jessica. Yeah, I'm so glad we were able to get you back on the show again and get through your session. It's very important topic, definitely, and something that I hope a lot of people take some of this and use whichever parts work for you. Yeah. Dig into some of those assessments, some of the behaviors you could do, and see how they work in your at your library. All right. So is that the last of your slides there then? Okay. Cool.
Yes,
I'm
I
going.
didn't remember to put a contact info one on there. So I'll
Oh,
add a contact info one at the end before I send it to you, Krista.
okay, perfect. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to change presenter control to my screen here for my wrap. I've got some more thank yous coming in. Thank you. You're welcome. All right, so as I said, today's show has been recorded. and will be available to everyone after this show. Here we go. All right, so if you use whatever is your search engine of choice and type in NCompass Live, the name of our show, you'll find our main page and our archive page. Our main page is here, nlc.nebraska.gov/NCompass Live. Here's our upcoming shows for this month and next month. But first, for the archives, right underneath the upcoming shows is always a link to our archived NCompass Live shows. And so here they are, the most recent one at the top of the page, and then going back in time. The recording should be ready and available for everyone by the end of the day tomorrow. Everyone who attended today's show and registered for today's show will get an email from me letting you know it's available. We also push it out on our mailing list we have here in Nebraska and out to our various social media. We do have, and you'll see it on some of our pages, we do have a Facebook page for NCompass Live. If you like to use Facebook, give us a like. You see we got reminders. Here's a reminder to log in today's show, announcing today's presenter. And then here's the one from last week, recording announcement. So you can follow us there. Or we also use the Nebraska Library Commission's Twitter account and Instagram. We use a little hashtag NCompLive to talk about the show too. Oh, more thank yous coming. Thank you. Great to see you both again. Good to see you all too. Great webinar. Lots of good helps. Glad to hear it. But so for our recording, yeah, it'll be here and it'll be pushed out on all our social media, and you'll get notified when it's ready by the end of the day tomorrow. While we're here, I'll show you, you can do a search here if you want to see if we've done a show on a particular topic of interest to you. You can type that in and see if we've done it, and it will come up. It'll search the title, the content. This is, I will give you a warning, this is our full show archives going back to when NCompass Live first premiered, and I'm not going to scroll down this whole list. As you can see, it is pretty huge, but it goes back to when the show first premiered, which is in January 2009. So this year, 2025, is the 17th year of NCompass Live. Oh my gosh, yeah. I know. I get, every time I have to do the math, I'm like, really? And we have our full show archives here. So just pay attention to the original broadcast date of anything that you watch. Everything has a date when it first happened. A lot of these things will be fine to watch. Good, useful information will stand the test of time, but some things will become old and outdated. Resources may have changed drastically. Links may be broken. People may work in a different place than whenever they presented for us. Just pay attention to that original broadcast date when you do watch any of our archives. But this is something libraries do. We keep things for historical purposes often, and as long as we have a place to keep them, which right now is the Library Commission's YouTube channel, we will always have our show archives available to you. So next week's show is on CES 2025, which is the Consumer Electronics Show. Brian Pitchman is going to be with us. He's been on the show quite a few times talking about lots of technology and AI type things. He has his own organization, the Evolve Project, but he attends the Consumer Electronics Show every year to advocate for libraries being more into technology and things. So he's going to come on the show and talk about things that he learned there. So if you're into tech, you can join us for that one. We also got some other shows scheduled here, and for the dates that aren't filled in yet, we're always here every Wednesday. I am working with people on finalizing some, dates and descriptions. So look for the schedule to be filled up, and please do register for any of our upcoming shows. Last thing I want to mention is another online event that we do here through the Library Commission is Big Talk from Small Libraries, coming up at the end of this month, February 28th. Friday, February 28th. It's always the last Friday in February. This is a conference that we do, an online conference that we do in conjunction with the Association for Rural and Small Libraries. It's all of our presenters are from libraries with an FTE or population served of 10,000 or less. So this is those little libraries, little small rural libraries. Our full schedule is up. Registration is available. So you can see who we have coming on the going to be there that day. We do have, I'm very excited, and he happens to be up here, the Best Small Library in America 2024 window. The winner, the Mendocino County Library, their Round Valley branch. Josh Bennett, the branch manager from there, will be with us to talk about their winning the Best Small Library in America award from Library Journal. So please do register. Registration's open through the day before the conference, and then you can still come in on the fly. But do join us for a big talk from small libraries. The entire day is recorded as well, so if you aren't able to join us for the whole day, you can only watch some of it, or you aren't available that day, you can always watch the recording. We have all of our previous conferences over here, and this year's will be there as well. We always record everything. So sign up for Big Talk, sign up for upcoming NCompass Lives. Thank you, everybody. Good to see you, Jessica. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Awesome. Good to see you again. And hopefully we'll see you all joining us on a future episode of NCompass Live.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.